So now you're the leader of the Asia Society. We have had a woman as past leader.
Yes.
What attracted you to this position?
Well, Asia, I've always known, Asia Society has such a wonderful reputation here in New York, in many other places around the world. And I've known Asia Society as, a presence in New York where wonderful things happened, and have come to see many of those while I was living here as part of the UN mission, and the Korean mission. But when I was offered to try out this position, of course, I looked more deeply into this. And at that point, having had so much more experience as foreign minister, now having this nearly 4 years of experience, intense experience of dealing with the world as a South Korean foreign minister, and then also the UN experience, I think, I have the skill set to take Asia Society to the next level. I think Asia Society is also wanting to make that leap from, not just about Asia, but with Asia. And I think I bring that with Asia element. Yes, Vishaka and Josette were my two women predecessors. Vishaka, we had a wonderful conversation with her. She is a great mentor. But they're all Americans, right? By I think, culturally, of course, she had a great Indian background, but the nationality of all of our predecessors, all of my predecessors were American, or Kevin Rudd, Australian. So I think the board really wanted to go beyond that traditional mold and bring in somebody who would really say, we are now not just about Asia, but with Asia. And here I am.
An Asian leader for the Asia Society.
Yes.